Hello, this is Ed Rigsbee, and welcome to Raw and Unedited, the place where association executives like you get tips, tactics, innovation, insight, and solutions, all to make you a more effective leader. Have you ever wondered, okay, so, there's this sometimes, how can we say, challenge to make it nice, where the board of directors is not on the same page as the paid staff. And if you've ever wondered how to deal with this, how to help the boards do a better job, how to help the boards be more professional, you are in luck today, because I've got Mark Buzan, who is the president of our executive director and association management company right outside of Ottawa, Canada. And more importantly than that, he's the founder of the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors. So Mark is kind of the guy that's got the answers. So Mark, let's get into it. Now, I want to know from your perspective, what makes the difference of perspective from a board member as far as a volunteer leader and a paid staff person?
That's a wonderful question, Ed. I can't claim that I'm going to have all of the answers today, but I'm happy to give the insight that I have of this. So it was actually particularly on that question that got me down my own personal path, if you will. About me, I'm a two-time executive director and president of two national associations. Ed, you and I worked together on a few things in the past, and even on a membership drive, an issue on one of them. And I found myself first coming to the role of being an executive director after first being doing a little stint here and there, as it often happens, to being on the board of a nonprofit. And I would look back on my path as being a younger man, and I would go there full of gusto and wanting to really, I want to make a difference. I want to contribute. I want to make that difference. And I would get on one of my first boards that I remember was a community health or a board organization. We were kind of overseeing the different health sectors and health services. And in Quebec, where I'm from, like we call them CLSCs. And I had my idea of, okay, this is what a board director is. We go over the I's on we dot the I's, we cross the T's, we look at all the finances, we provide the direct input towards that. And naive as I was, I'd never heard of Carver or anything like that. I really just kind of went there, and from the best of intentions, I came from a good place. I wanted to contribute. I had a desire, I had a passion. And I thought that the best way of doing that was to be able to really get my fingers into things. I imagine some executive directors are hearing this and they're cringing right now, but you have to understand that from the perspective from the board there. They're coming, I do believe fundamentally, they're coming from a good place. They're coming from a real desire there. It's just that we as executive directors, people who are the staff, we can get geeked out on all the really interesting stuff because it's our career, it's our job, right? We have to be constantly reminding ourselves that the people that come to the board that are leaders, they're leaders in their own right. They may be professions. This is their side gig. And there's no payment for this. You get a lot of grief for it. You're taken away from your career. Sometimes maybe you even want to put at the chagrin of your boss. In some cases, there, you're taken away from your family. And really, the only payoff of this is I get to feel good. I personally feel enriched on this. I do believe that that's the reason people do. They join from this. They're looking for what's your personal payoff on this. So I think on one that the difference is you've got executive directors and staff who view this. They're in the day in day out of it. The operations that they see the impacts of it. This is their paid career. If you'd ask that same person, that same board director, I think, and gone to their workplace and ask them a myriad of questions of how things are done at the business, they probably would come from a very different perspective of things because they too are in that business. But when they come to the board, it's a bit of it's an uncertain place. It's an uncertain place. So I don't know if I've answered completely the question. There's a dichotomy of just where people are coming from.
I understand looking at the psychology of the person. The challenge that a lot of people that are your colleagues and my colleagues that are watching this, they're looking at, okay, yeah, I get that. I get that the board members are volunteers. I get that they come from a good place. I get that they have a good heart and they want to make a difference. And also a lot of association executives realize that these people, while they're leaders in their own right in their industry, most of them don't have a clue as to nonprofit governance, nonprofit law, whether it be in Canada or in the U.S., whichever laws in the U.S. We have our bylaws. Well, actually, we have our articles of incorporation as the top document, then our bylaws, then our policies and procedures. And a lot of the board people, there's this tendency in some organizations, especially in old organizations, that they feel that they own it, and they feel that the paid staff are really just nothing more than clerical people. You're here to take notes at our meeting, not to offer us guidance.
Well, part of the challenge of what you're saying, though, Ed, is that you've got these laws and all like this. I mean, you're preaching to the choir on this. I can get all geeked. You and I, we can get all geeked out about this, and we're fascinated about this stuff. But as part of that journey that I took, long before I started our executive director, the association management company, and then after that, the society as well. After being a board director and then having to be brought back, frankly, behind the shed to warn you that this is not your role, and being quite disappointed because I said, well, I'm not interested in being a rubber stamp. And incidentally, by the way, that's sometimes the opposite risk, frankly, of organizations that can be so policy governance, so wrong like this, that the board member, it's not an enriching experience. Where's the payoff for them? And that can also happen. But nonetheless, the dichotomy of that, and we're talking about these things, and it's important for executive directors, et cetera, to be mindful of this stuff, that you don't get so geeked out on this that you lose track of what's the payoff for volunteer board director.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think I know it's always going to be a really delicate balance, but the thing that strikes and responds back to what you were saying about somebody doesn't really understand this or like this. I watched a excellent video blog posting by Joan Gary. I don't know if you know her or not, but she's pretty known in the not-for-profit space. It's got a very large blog. It's from New York, I think. And she said something really profound. She says, you get the board you choose. You get the board you choose. So if you're complaining about the board that you have, maybe you have a policy or your practice is, do you have two legs and a heartbeat? Come on board.
Well, that's interesting. I probably would disagree with that, and here's why. Well, it depends on the situation. But I want to make sure I don't forget to ask you a question. But addressing that, I belong to the National Speakers Association, and I'm simply a member, nothing more than a member, 30-year member, big deal. 20 years ago, let's say, they shifted from popular election, meaning, at the convention, everybody voted for the board members, to a more, let's call it, hidden slate / cabal. And I know cabal is not the right word, but it sure seems like it. And so the way to become a board member there is very, very odd, and it's very incestuous in the respect that the people that are on the board, they basically choose the people they like, and more like them. So if you're in a situation, and backing up, because several years ago, the executive director of the National Speakers Association, who's not there now, he made a statement that this way is benchmark. This is the way that most of the associations are doing it. Well, the next year at ASAE, I was in a CEO meeting because I am the CEO of the Cigar Peg. So, and I asked the organizer or the facilitator of me, I said, would it be okay if we just did a quick straw poll? And he goes, well, sure, what do you want to know? And I said, well, I would like to know in this room how many people, their organization, how many people the board is selected, popular vote, versus how many people the board is selected by some committee or by the board itself.
Yeah.
And when that vote came out, 3/4 of the people said they elect their board members by popular vote. So here's I think, a challenge that a lot of people are dealing with. Now, if it's an association or society or a philanthropy where the executive director kind of gets to handpick their board members, then you're right with that statement that that executive director or chief staff executive, what do they call themselves? Man, they deserve who they chose. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of associations out there still in North America. And based on the straw poll at ASAE, 3/4 of them, the executive director or the chief staff executive, they don't get to choose. The body chooses. So within that, let me ask you, the people that come to your society, the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors, when they come, what are the skills that you're finding on, I'm sure it's across the board, but what are the skills that you're finding that they're lacking? That when these people are coming, that they just, you're maybe even a little surprised that they don't have those skills. What are the skills that they're lacking?
Well, we're kind of fortunate in a sense, and we're very still much a startup. But from the group that we've kind of put together, I would classify them frankly as the go-getters of a board. There's always a board is always going to be made up of certain people that are real go-getters, the others that are there more for the title, and then those that I call it are the followers. They kind of see where everybody else is going, and then they kind of go in that direction. So people who join the society tend to be board directors in their own right, who are looking to take their things to the next step. The challenges we addressed so far in our first year in a variety of different these round tables, these of which you took part in, they range from, I'm a volunteer. I got a sense that things are not necessarily right with the organization, but I'm not there all the time. What's my place, and how do I raise this effectively and professionally, so that this doesn't become a whole situation, a drama in my whole life? I'm doing this because I want to be a leader, but I also want to provide that. So there's a degree of uncertainty there, and I think, I guess in an unfettered kind of plug for the society, that was sort of the reason, the impetus, frankly, for founding it, was we were finding. And I was finding, after speaking, in starting my AMC, I was speaking with board directors from all over, mostly all Canada, but all over the world in many instances. And I was finding the same pardon my goddamn problem every single couple of the same 3 or 4 problems that were coming across there.
What were those 3 problems?
They were, one, they would get on the board, and then it was a bit of a bait and switch kind of thing. Oh, it's not going to be all that much work, and then it ends up being something, and one called it, it's almost become a second job for me. I've got to, and that's a problem for some of them. Let's say some boards are made up of let's say owners of a business where they've got more latitude. But if you're made up of a board and you've got to report to a boss, getting the dirty look from your boss while you're taking a phone call or on a conference call, or being forced as a result of this to constantly take time, get on a conference call, 2 or 3 hour conference call when you've got to put your kids to bed like this, can be really taxing. So that was the first problem. The second problem is that they come to the board with a desire. I've yet to meet somebody yet. Maybe they exist out there who's got a passion for doing the minutes, right? But inevitably the work has got to get done. And this happens perhaps more with the smaller organizations, right? So they come to the board with these hopes, aspirations that you know what, I'm going to meet smart people. I've asked a lot of them. One board director who's on the Canadian counterpart of the NSA there, he said, I joined my board because I wanted to meet people, meet and surround myself with people who are smarter than me. That's pretty profound. He wanted something. He had reached people who are, I find people who are board directors who are top performers, that you can usually see a trend. They've achieved a certain degree of maturity. They've achieved a certain degree of accomplishment in their professional and personal lives. And this is their form of being able to give back and their payback on this. And I think people have to be willing to understand and not get all flustered by the concept that it's reasonable to expect and to be prepared to offer something to board directors, a payoff, not a financial payoff, but another kind of payoff. And that's a personally enriching experience. So that frustration would be, I got on board for this, but then I'm being sucked into all these kinds of other things as well.
Other things like what?
Oh my word! I'm being pulled into a marketing committee, and we're drafting up, the email there. This conference, is taking up a lot of time here. Why is that being the case? Very much the case here. If you want to hold on a minute, I've got even the. Let's see, what was some of the common. Hold on. Here we go. So one of four things is, like I said, the volunteer role a board member signs up for becomes much more in terms of responsibility than they originally planned, and that they were sold a different bill of goods. Okay. 2, the excitement of the mission gets bogged down in governance. I know we're geeks about governance and like that, but for the average person, it's like, my God, just zip over their head there. That's not what people get on board for. They can maybe be sold on that later on, or growing funds, or not really enough about the reason that the original passion for volunteering. There's a challenge and then a perception that some board members are not pulling their weight and others are doing more work. And that can create some gelling. I remember some boards saying that there's some that join the board as quote unquote trolls. They're there for the title, frankly, to a career advancement. Personally, I don't think that's a big thing, as long as they're willing to put up a little bit of thing. You've got to be willing, again, associations, nonprofits, they have to be willing to recognize that there has to be a give and take for somebody's time, their valuable time. And fourth, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's hard to get managers to let their staff go out and do that kind of thing. So those are more or less that kind of a variation of the 3 or 4 challenges I often found were the biggest things. And I don't know how much this kind of answers your original question, but that's what I found it. But the biggest thing that was happening is why this keeps on getting repeated is that just the nature of nonprofits is that they're set up in silos, right? This association handles pest control. The next one handles automotive. The next one is about nurses or doctors. When would those people ever connect? Otherwise, unlikely. And this is why, coming from the personal experience of first being frustrated at being a board director, and then later on being frustrated as an executive director and a president, where I was finding either one of 2 extremes, the board being so much in my business that you couldn't even breathe,
sure.
or the other extreme of things, which I probably is not the least worst of 2 cases, but the other extreme, which isn't fun either, is that you literally have to jump on the hood of their car to get their attention to move discussion along. So
let's take those 2. So let's take the one where the board is totally in your business, doesn't give you room to breathe, and I think I know which group you're talking about, but I would never mention it on this video. So in that situation, the paid chief staff executive, he or she gets the job. They were sold a bill of goods, and all of a sudden they get there, and the board says, "No, you're here to take out the trash. You're here to take notes.
Yeah,
you're here to do our tax return. Other than that, just leave us alone." So, how does a person deal with that, or is your advice, leave as soon as
You
possible?
got to there's no easy answer to that, honestly. On the staff side of things, I mean, I'm coming more and trying to go, frankly, from the perspective of trying to understand the board member. That's more my client market. But speaking to an executive director, nonetheless, who's dealt with some pretty wacky situations, and have counseled others to say that are going through this thing. The first thing I'd say is, as an executive director, unfortunately, you're probably bound in, it's going to be destiny that you're going to be dealing with at least one of those situations in your career, if you may decide to make this your career. If you've got a board that's really in your business, that's a problem. That's really problematic. There's a few things. Usually it's driven by one or two board members. And it could be a variety of reasons. They've got to be in their bun. They think that things are not being done untoward, or it's a sense that, or maybe it's driven by a lack of understanding, frankly, that they think that they're the, I'm going to show everybody, I'm going to be the Lone Ranger and save the day, kind of thing. I personally, I use a tactic of just loading them with information. I just keep on loading and bearing them with bearing paper. That's a bit of a tactic there, frankly. It says, find something. If you're open to it, I've got nothing to hide.
So wait, when you load them with information, this is great. I love this.
You load them in information and say, look, find something. If you find something, I'd be, and like, if there's a room for improvement, I'd be happy to hear for that. I try as much as to get on board. But inevitably, though, if the problem gets to be too much, you got a few options. One, you're going to have to take hopefully you've developed a good relationship with the chair. And that hopefully your situation is that you've got a strong-minded chair. If you don't, well, that's a whole other situation and probably a whole other conversation in itself. That this is going to have to be developed and say, look, this is becoming untenable, and the staff is not being able to move forward. It's holding back the dynamics, because inevitably, too, eventually those type of people wear down the go-getters even on the board. It has a demoralizing effect. It's amazing how the power of even just one out of 10 or 10 to 20 can really bring down the whole group. It's why it's so important, frankly, from the beginning. In my opinion, why I was talking about how you have to vet from the beginning to avoid these kinds of situations. If it doesn't come down that point, now, hopefully you've been able to counsel and get the board. And this is a delicate situation for the CSO, because he or she has to be on top of things, but at the same time cannot be perceived as being as commanding the show. It's a very dangerous area. So hopefully your board chair can take this in, and with the end objective of getting everybody on board towards some board training and getting a clear identification on this. Also, this is where it's so critical that your policies are well established. Ed, my frustration on this side is having looked with and spoken with, even now on an AMC side of things, or looking at opportunities as being contracted out executive director. One of my first questions when I'm counted this is, can I see your policies? I need to see your policies. I need to know what I'm getting into, and what's there. That's a very indicative. I can tell you often the response, or better yet, the lack of response, is very indicative. Very, very indicative. The ones that come forward and give me something off the bar, and they're not showing that gives me a good sense of that. Unfortunately, I am finding more and more boards who just don't know what the hell I'm talking about like this, or they'll throw me the bylaws, and then I said, no, the policies. Or if they do throw the policies, and I'm like this, but there's nothing in the policies that deal with the separation of powers of the chief of staff officer and the board. They've got a ton of policies on travel, on how to run a meeting. Maybe they have a little bit about what's expected of how to deal with staff, like you're undering staff, but no guidelines of this. So it's really important. I'm finding, frankly, at this point in my career too, I'm becoming more and more picky about who you take on, who you start there.
Sure.
And this is where it is. You really got to try to, I'm going to say this, you got to cut it off at the pass, the beginning out there. Maybe your situation is different. You got to take whatever. Okay, fine. But really, ideally, you've got to be able to find a way to cut this off the pass. If they can't answer these hard questions about the number one question, how does the board resolve differences of opinion between the executive director and the board? Shut your mouth. If you hear crickets or an uncomfortable kind of look, like, we've never had a disagreement because the same executive director has been in place for 25 years and they've kind of led the show. Ooh, mark against you. Mm-hmm. Two, I had another question to that effect. Now I've slipped my mind, but these are kind of things are really critical to be establishing. If you're stuck in a situation, and this can happen, and it happened to me, frankly, in one of my careers there, where things started out fantastic, but then you had a complete changeover. I had a situation where 80% of my board changed over, like that. So I had a completely different group that didn't come in with the same impetus or mandate that was given to me. And lesson learned, bad on me, Mark. I didn't double check to see to verify with the board. Is this still the mandate you want me to do this? I carried on with the mandate that was given with me, but they had a different idea and they weren't aware of that. These are just really, really critical areas. I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems, the differentials of this. My view on it, frankly, is the executive directors, more often than not, are not the problem. I think what we have is, and this was where the society came about, and why I founded this, was saying, this is a crying need, and even a lot of the good, well-intentioned, we're not going to be able to capture. I don't pretend we're going to be able to capture or recruit every single board director of a nonprofit on this planet, but there's a lot of them out there that are goodwill, that want to do good work. They're unsure, though, of where to go. Many of them, the good leaders, are kind of, you've got the group mentality. I think this is there, but I'm scared to ask the question. I'm scared to ask the hard questions by being perceived by my executive director as being nosy and not trusting them. And that's not what it is. I'm trying to understand my limits there too. Or worst yet, I don't want to be a shit disturber. That's more something than that. I don't want to do that. I'm doing this because I want to have something, get this out of there. And this is supposed to be fun. And you know what? It should be fun.
So, with your society in educating the board members, I was chatting the other day with an association CEO, and she was telling me about some of the challenges with her board. And I was recommending to her, I said, well, why don't you find money in the budget to next year? This year it's too late, but next year take your president-elect and even possibly your vice president with you to ASAE, or up in Canada to CSAE. Yeah. And not trying to, I know your organization, your society is just getting cranking. And so you're not quite at the level where you'll probably be in about 5 years when, you're going to start having your own meetings and all those kind of cool things. But, it's almost like, and tell me your thought on this. It's almost like when I'm looking at this, you look at these people that are good people, that want to make a difference, that want to volunteer, and truly are what I would call an unconscious incompetent. They truly don't know what they don't know. And the executive director can only teach them so much. And there's this dichotomy of where, a board member may not listen to their executive director, but they may listen to other people at a conference.
Exactly.
And so, taking them to a meeting like yours when you start having your annual meetings, or like for now at the Canadian Society.
We do them virtually, yeah.
But I mean, physically take them there and immerse them for 3 or 4 days into, having conversations. And it just seems to me that from my observation, there's so many board members that they major in the tactics and minor in the strategy. And that's exactly backwards. So let me ask you a really difficult question. And I know that there's probably no answer, but I want to get your thoughts on this. So we got an association and we got an executive director that was brought in, let's just say last year. Executive director, CEO, chief staff executive, whatever the term. They're brought in. And they realize that the volunteer leaders really don't know what they're doing. They're running around in circles like chickens with their head cut off. And the chief staff executive says to themselves, I've got to turn this organization away from volunteer-led to staff-led, from to where the volunteers offer the strategic governance, not the daily dot this I, cross this T.
To which my answer would be, if the executive director is saying this, tread thyself very carefully. Okay. Tread thyself very carefully.
But how do they start? What, I mean, because you've been through
the best they can do. This has taken me. I'm going to impart my heart into this. And this is taking from me in my mid-age in my career. It took me a long time to learn this. You can only help somebody who wants to be helped. That took me. I'll be honest with you, Ed. That took me on a personal level, a very long time to learn, accept, embrace in myself. 2, the best an executive director can do is drop breadcrumbs. And knock on wood, hopefully you've got a strong board, strong-willed and a strong-minded board director board chair with whom you're on the same level with. In many ways, it's very. I'll impart you something that's really particular here. Years back, I attended a breakfast session here at CSAE in Ottawa with one of the leading lobbyists and lobby firms here in Ottawa, and he specializes in associations. And he said something that's still to this day, many years later, is very profound. He said, and it'll be probably applicable in the States as well. He says, the politics that happen on Parliament Hill have nothing on the politics that happen within association boards. So true. He said, some of the stuff that goes on and you guys have witnessed here would make a member of Parliament blush. So you have to be, if you're going to succeed, and this is admittedly too, I'm there where if older Mark had been able to go back in time and take the younger Mark behind the back shed and give a lesson on things, it's a lot of the times it's about timing. It's just about the right timing, and you've got to be able to read the political tea leaves, if you will. Do you really think that this is something you get? Because the other part about it is just imparting about this, is recognizing that board directors come and go, recognizing, which is a good thing and can be a bad thing, and it's a good thing there. Sometimes it's just a question of waiting it out and when you got the right time for this. I'm counseling another association that's going through this exact same problem, a very large one. They've got a council of some 30, and there's just one person that's causing problems for the whole thing. Amazing. I think about that for a moment there. And the only thing that they can do is just say, you know what, we got to wait this guy out. We'll just keep loading him with paperwork, say, yes, sir, no, sir, we'll do what we can, and do what we can.
So that's fascinating.
It's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating, particularly if from a personality like me, I am all piss and vinegar. I just get in something like that. So it took me personally, I'm parting this really personal level, that it took me a long time, frankly, and maturity to get to learn that. You've got to decide, frankly, is that the kind of thing that you can do? If not, some things that you can, like I said, you can only help somebody who wants to be helped. And at that point, you're going to have to make a decision. Is this really where I want to go, or maybe do I need to move on?
Wow.
I wish it were I had a magical answer for that, but that's that. If that's where you're at, really, that's the best advice I can offer.
Fascinating. Boy, that sure took this thing from a big high down to a low.
I know I'm Mr. Bummer. I know, but
Ah.
you can take it from a guy who, frankly, I've witnessed in my career, as you know, I've witnessed two high and lows of just of the extremes, frankly, of a board. Well, the three extremes of being a board director who was, as you said, unconsciously competent. I came to wanting to know, never even know who is this Carver guy. I never heard of this guy before. I want to help and give good community service in where I live, to being an executive director who was called upon to fix everything. And that's a dangerous thing, Tom, there. And the board loved me, but then another, the policies were not set in place all that clearly. Another board came in, and lo and behold, I was dealing with as much of the problem there. To the other extreme too, of board directors who were just absent-minded, who were absentee board directors who just kind of showed up for the annual cocktail and gala.
So, let me ask you this. I want to circle back to something. One thing that really hit me that you said in dealing with that one board member that's a pain in the neck, or that tries to control things, or tries to be the big voice. You said a couple times that you load them down with information, and I love that idea. I just don't quite understand it, and so I guess the question that I have for you, getting into the weeds on this, is how do you load a board member down with information in a way that he or she doesn't realize, number one, that you're loading them down, and then number two, when you load down, what kind of stuff do you give them, and how do you get it to them? So I'd like to.
I do say it with a bit of a tongue in cheek, and I hope I'm not going to offend some board directors who are more my crowd that saying, what's Mark's hidden agenda? But no. In all seriousness, a lot of board directors can relate to this too, because they're like, most often I've witnessed the ones that are the go-getters are often the ones too that are rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, come on, can we just get on with it?" Unfortunately, a lot of them, because of lack of knowledge or lack of skills or cultural or interpersonal skills, don't know how to deal with this, and they rely too much on the executive director to solve the problem, who is not the person to handle that problem. But the thing that you try to do, and I'm witnessing right now, is you have to be really the right type of personality to be able to breathe. Don't take this personally. This is a job. They come from, you have to understand there's got to be what's their reasoning really behind this, and work with them. What would you like to see? Like, I witnessed this one, I won't name the association. They're California based, actually, and an international association. They've got a board director from the Midwest, I believe, and he wanted to see all the financials. Well, he says, I hope you can appreciate, for confidentiality, security reasons, we can't do that. Come on into the office. And they gave him they loaded the table much like an auditor, and say, and literally approached it. We're open to your comments. What do you need and what there? And it's really important that, and that's one example there. I dealt with a board director who's really difficult, whom, for example, was absolutely appalled with the state of our minutes. Now, Ed, I'd seen the minutes that we did were probably superior to what CSAE did, were equivalent to, superior or equivalent to what CSAE did. They were better than the Canadian Medical Association, which was an organization that's got we were a staff of 3. They had a building of 3 stories. But she was absolutely dead set against them and thought that things were horrible. All right, well, I said, my staff and it's a little frustrating. I said to her, but we're going to try to work with her and say, here's what we've done in minutes. Would you like to go through this? Now, it was painful. because that is a case of, frankly, of the the micromanaging on something like this. And in the end, to give her credit, I think we did come up with a better product. That we did come up with a better product as a result of it. The process was a little painful. The way she went about it, I still don't disagree with. But I still try to hold down the degree of maturity and believe, in the end, we did actually get a better product out of it.
So in that situation,
that board member felt like they, what?
Yeah. So in that situation, Mark, and this is, you brought up an interesting point. So here's a board member that perhaps is right and perhaps goes about explaining what they want incorrectly, or perhaps doesn't have the best personality, but perhaps they were right. And by just taking a breath, gulping your pride and go, let's see. But, within that though, if it's a board person, it seems to me, and tell me what you think on this, it seems to me that it's the responsibility of the chief elected officer, whether they're president or chair or whatever it is, whatever their title is, that they should be dealing with that person rather than forcing you to deal with that person. What are your thoughts on that?
The chief staff officer should be forced to
No. What I'm saying is, if we've got board member, let's call this board member Sue, and she's giving the executive director, the CEO, the paid staff grief about the minutes. Well, in this, where is the board chair, board president? Let's call him Bill. So where's Bill, the guy that was the top elected officer? Where's Bill in dealing with Sue? Isn't it Bill's job to deal with Sue and not?
It is supposed to be, and it is supposed to be. And in my case, and in the ideal situation, you're 100% right. Unfortunately, sometimes that comes about is what I call is the board chair, the wimp board chair. Who's a wimp? Who's a wimp? I faced that personal situation. She was a wonderful lady. Don't remember, it was a wonderful lady. I'd give her the time of day, and I still respect her greatly there. And if you ever heard this, I apologize, please. I don't want to, but she too came from a really good place here. And under other circumstances was a decent leader. But this happens, unfortunately, a lot in the dynamics that are occurred because board directors are really so uncertain. I mean, executive directors, you're hard on your board, but you've got CSAE in Canada, you've got ASAE, you've got in the United Kingdom, you've got the Association of Executives, you've got Board Source, you've got everything. You're in this 24/7. You live and breathe this. Try to put the shoe on the other foot there and recognize that from the board director, this is not what they do for a living, and that was why the sense of this there. And then you couple it on with from the board director's perspective, who, if I go up against the board director or the executive director, they know more than me. I'm afraid they know more than me. This is not an equal. This is not in a discussion of me going out and challenging. This is not a meeting of equals, if you will. Although it should be, or more so, it's just because of the knowledge gap there of what's going on on a day-by-day basis. If they worked it with you side by side, day to day, it'd probably be a different situation. But you have to keep in mind that they don't. They just don't know that. So there's in my discussion with a lot of board directors, and I've spoken with hundreds of them in the last number of years, getting the society going and starting on AMC. The discussions I've had with them, when a frank conversation. When, with due respect, the executive director, the executive director is not in the room where they feel comfortable with that, they're talking to colleagues there, is a whole different thing than what you'd see. And with due respect, the event that they put on at CSAE and ASAE between the chief staff officer and the elected board is fantastic. Keep it going. It's great. However, what they won't tell you is that there's a lot of stuff that's going on in their head that they won't say up because they're afraid of, frankly, challenging. So I don't know if you've answered your question.
Well, why don't we back up on that? So you say that I'm trying to make sure I got this right. So if if the board of directors were having a conversation about their paid executive director, where the paid executive director isn't in the room, the information that they would share would be shocking. And give me some examples of some of the things that you most commonly hear that
well, I don't want to relay that there because I've got confidences on them, but I'll give you a little bit of, I'll speak in generalities. How's that?
Okay.
One, it's often enough. It's often led by a couple dynamic of the strong personalities. We did a session for board directors. Now, when was it? A little more than a year ago, on the different personalities and board dynamics and conflict that happen. So I'd have to dig that up and maybe post that on the blog, or give that to you at a later date for you to consider, and anybody who follows us to consider. But they identified basically 5 different types of personalities, and one of those personalities would be the strong leader. They see things and they take command of that. There's the friend, there's the foe, there's the wimp. there's the different types. You get the general idea. They all, and the follower, and then there's something like this. Somebody whom I respected like that, he had the 5 Fs, if you will. It was the different types of personalities, and the foe will come out and speak, and usually, no matter what the hell you tell them, something is amiss and something is incorrect, and no matter what that are, you've got to deal with that. You've got the friend that will stick by the executive director, and no matter what they unless they failing them going out and murdering every firstborn child, they will stick by that executive director no matter what. The follower will see in the air, and they'll see where the tea leaves go, and the discussion going. So depending on where you've got your makeup there, it's hard for me to answer that question directly, but some of the things that will come up, and what it often stems from is, again, they're not in this full-time, 24/7, like you are. Understand that, get that ingrained in there. Don't get frustrated about it. It is what it is. They are wondering, well, what's really going on? What's really going on? Maybe I heard a complaint from one of the other staff groups that reports up to this thing. Is there any truth to that? Or maybe I don't know. I don't know. Imagine this. Think from your perspective. You're supervising somebody whom at best, at least on national associations, you might see 4 times a year in person. Think about that for a moment. I've had staff where I see them on a day-to-day basis. I got a good idea over time. I get to learn them, learn about them. I know them. I got an idea of whether they're on top or stuff like that. How do you do that when you only see somebody for 4 times a year? And maybe you hear from them on a conference call once a month.
Or sometimes you only see them once a year.
There you go, even worse. So how are you supposed to come up there? And then you imagine the dynamic, and this is where sometimes why the recruitment is so important to this. You get one foe on the board there, and if they're a charismatic person who can really rabble-rouse like this, they'll swoop over the followers, who tend to be in the majority actually on most boards.
Was that so?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm kind of, what's going through my head is going, okay, so we've got a large group of followers in the middle, and there's not always, but frequently there's an idiot that can't fight their way out of a bag, and so they just fumble and bumble, and you just let them be, but. And yes, frequently see somebody that's your confidant, that they love you, but this foe. So when you get this foe, and this foe is charismatic enough to swing over all these people in the middle of the followers, is it good enough for the executive director, whatever the paid top person is, to load that foe down with information? Or are there other strategies for trying to bring that foe into the, not foe, but
you've got a few options. If again, and I want to stress that there are factors playing in there, and unfortunately for the executive director, this is my observation of things. Maybe Glenn Tecker or others who might have a different opinion on this. You've really got only a very limited number of options to go. Your first option is professionally approach the person and say, how can I help, and how can I provide whatever. And that's where I said a little tongue in cheek there. I didn't want to say a little tongue in cheek there. You load them, just give them what they need and say, is that enough? How would you like to see? Would that be sufficient enough? If that's not going to work, then hopefully you've got a strong board chair and you haven't got a wimp that you can go to and say, Bob, Sue, Bill, Ed, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm really frustrated. And now you've got a conversation, frankly, of an employee to your boss who's just having a gripe about the work environment, the work environment. Hopefully your board chair can be conscientious enough to listen, to hear you out. More often than not, I find that's usually that type of person is somebody who's run a business, who has employees of themselves. They've got a little bit of experience in how to manage that. If you don't, well, then that's a whole other issue. And then that person has to take the lead. At that point in time, it's going to have to be a further discussion. And it depends on how much that board chair has got of a backbone. If that's not working, if you tried that process and you're working through this again, and it's not happening, you got two options then as an executive director. Can I wait them out? Just suck it up and wait them out? Or is it time for me to look to broader horizons? Sad as it might say, again, I'm biased on this. This is why I think you EDs, you're fine. You're not the problem. You're not the problem. I mean, more or less. There's going to be bad EDs and good EDs, but more or less, you guys have got resources, and you just have to look. They're out the wazoo. Go to ASAE. I mean, you can, with governance experts, they're going to dump on you, and they're going to probably get probably. For me, in my email, I have like 10, 15 marketing emails from every kind of consultant or expert on the sun there. But there's nothing or very little out directed towards the reality that a board director faces. And that's just personally what, on my own personal mission, having gone through this, my own that led me to that saying. And, the society, maybe we work, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but we're going to at least give it a shot to do this something. And we found that the people who are keen, that volunteer, that want to do something, are the ones that tend to engage and then relay that information back.
Mark, it's a noble thing you're doing, building a society to serve nonprofit board members. It really is a noble thing, and my hope is that society thrives, because there is no question in my mind that education is needed for board members. Education in what their role is, education in what governance is, education in understanding the difference between being a strategic person giving direction to paid staff and a person that gets in the weeds. One organization I worked with, each director of a division thought they were the boss of the staff in that division. And it was like, they really, really thought they were the boss. They thought that their job was to manage. And it would be like, and then that person would come in, do a little bit of stuff, and then disappear for 3 weeks and not to be found because they're busy running their own business. And then they surface for a day or 2 or 3 and stir it up again and then disappear. And staff can't get anything done. So, I think that this is important work that you're doing. And,
thank you.
And I really hope that it can move forward. And I guess the one thing that still is kind of gnawing in me, and maybe there's no answer, but somehow the association staff world, the world of American Society of Association Executives, the world of Canadian Society of Association Executives, I think there's a hole. And I think there's a hole in teaching executives, how do we transition our association, our society, from volunteer-led, managed, driven, which is a 1970 model, which doesn't work anymore because of the fact that the people don't have the kind of time.
Yeah.
Executives don't have a staff of 13 clerical people to do the work. And so the era of that is dead, gone, and it doesn't work. And how do we help associations? How do we help the paid staff help their boards to realize it's time to let go and let the professional staff do the job you hired them to do?
That is the multi-million-dollar question, Ed. And I think the only thing is, my answer to that is in my quest of literally interviewing board directors from across Canada, some in the United States as well, I asked them that question. Because ultimately it comes from the leadership. There's a certain degree, I know as executive directors, we're a little bit more of that go-getter. We want to get things done like this, but ultimately it's the board's organization. And that leadership and voluntary, that come from them in some degree or another. I wish there was a magical answer to that. I think it comes down to 1, timing, 2, the politics and the culture around the board, and getting the right and the culture that requires getting the right types of people in there as well. This gets even more acute, frankly, in my world, because I deal, as you know, as association management company, I deal with, and my prospects tend to be, very volunteer driven associations that have, they've got revenues coming in, but they're at that cusp. And I asked them, and I've asked a number of them when they made the switch over, when they finally made the switch over, I said, what was the tipping point? And the tipping point, more often than not, was just a recognition that, this isn't working. We got sick and tired. They got sick and tired. And the other part of it there, the critical element of what they needed is that they had a strong board chair who would lead it like a politician leading his or her country and say, no, goddammit, we're going to get this done. And would be willing to invest some of their own personal and political capital in pushing this through. That's sometimes there has to be. I wish there was a way, and I know this is going to be disappointing for some executive directors to hear this. I don't think there is a magic solution. You've just got to you've got to read the tea leaves. Being an executive director, good one, is yes, knowing all the technique, but there's a good element, and this also took me a long time to be able to. There's a good element of being able to read the political situation and say, how can I manage, and what do you think that I can get away with? Mm-hmm. And what am I personally willing to risk or put up there? Okay. So that's the key element. Many, the ones that even flounder, I've seen some I've seen some of these, as I mentioned, these smaller organizations who've been managing to get along with this. I mean, for God's sakes, the board chair has been in the role for 15 years. I've seen this. He's been in the role for 15 years. He's the lead guy that does the conferences and like this. You're getting money coming in and he's burning out, but then the moment he gets and says, okay, I'm going to be able to look and maybe I'll look at this option, but then he gets a little bit of a whiff of fresh young blood in as volunteers. Oh, we're all saved again. We're all saved again. This kind of equates to a little bit of a funny story. Parable, if you will, I'd heard once. Imagine the situation. It's a hot day. A man sitting on a bench, and he's got his little hound dog sitting beside him on the porch. And you come up and you ask, you see the dog, and the dog starts to go, and you say, "What's wrong with the dog?" "Oh, he's sitting on a nail." Well, why doesn't he just get up? Well, it doesn't hurt him that much. That's what happens. There has to be. I think there has to be the right type of situation where the pain of the problem exceeds, and that's the other element that why timing comes. The pain of the problem has to get so bad That's saying, that's it. I'm sick and tired of it. Because I've also seen a lot of boards saying, yeah, I don't like it, but as you said before we got recording, the fear of change overtakes everything else.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. My observation is most of the boards of directors want change. They just don't want to go through the pain, effort, and energy of changing.
Yeah.
And, with that, I want to give you a shout out. Your website is nonprofitboarddirectors.org. Is that right?
Correct.
And I think that you mentioned that people could get a free trial membership. Could you just give me the one?
Yeah, we offer this right now. Get in there. It's a free trial membership at the same time. Try for board directors as well. Give it a month trial. We are right now rejigging and reconfiguring a lot of our efforts. We're going on a major campaign, but we've got a number of our pre-recorded sessions over the course of the last year that are up, as well as an online directory. We've got another great resource that's going to be out as well. And now this is, you take that URL and say survey.nonprofitboarddirectors.org. It's a free self-assessment that matches up against everything that I've spoken to all hundreds of board directors about from their perspective, not from governance, high-priced governance consultants, not from the executive directors, from their perspective, from board directors, about what makes for a rewarding and productive board experience. Have your board directors take this and do a little bit of it, just own self-assessment. It's free of charge to do it. You'll get a personalized thing, and at the end, you even get we even throw in one of our ebooks that's just been put out. It's seven tips to improving board dynamics.
Give me that URL again. It's
survey.nonprofitboarddirectors. I know it's a mouthful. .org.
Okay. So in other words, you put survey dot in front of your regular URL.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure. Mark, that's awesome. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time today to share your expertise. And, I think you put out there, in many regards, a truth that a lot of people are afraid to hear, that sometimes it's time to, if you can't fish, it's time to cut bait and move on. But also you gave some pretty good tips on how some people can do that. So again, Mark Buzan, our executive director, www.ourexecutivedirector.com if you want to hire his association management company, or if you want to join the Society of Nonprofit Board Directors, it's nonprofitboarddirectors.org. Again, Mark, thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone.